If you see a man with twisted antlers, read this page as if your life depends on it. I sat down, popping a cool mint gum into my mouth, and observed the woman sitting opposite me. She was nervous, her fidgety hands clasped together and her eyes red-rimmed. "Long night?" I asked. She looked up timidly, her face clouded with unease. She didn't understand what was happening, didn't understand why she was here, tucked away in an abandoned warehouse with a man old enough to be her father. It was fine, I'd seen this many times before. "Hey," I said, loosening the tie around my neck. "Like I said, I just want to ask you a few questions, then you can go." "Why am I here?" she said in a small voice. "This is exactly the kind of place where someone would take me to butcher me." I smiled. She wasn't wrong, she didn't like this place. Yet, for now, it was probably the safest place on Earth for her. "Do you have snipers on those iron beams up there?" she asked, a hint of sarcasm in her voice, but her eyes still darted nervously up to the dimly lit steel walkways along the walls. She pulled her sweater tighter around her, shivering as a draft swept through. "Or is this some kind of government black site?" "Both of your guesses are wrong." I leaned back in my creaking wooden chair. "This place is the safest for you simply because I am here," I said. Not a lie, at least not entirely untrue. She, however, gave me a disbelieving look, the kind usually reserved for arrogant braggarts, which I probably deserved. It was time to pivot. "Tell me about the event." She stared at me for a long moment, then shook her head. "On second thought," she said, picking up her handbag, "I'd rather talk to the police." She stood up, intending to leave, and I didn't stop her. Her footsteps echoed across the empty warehouse, the flickering lights casting her shadow in every direction. I heard her mumble something under her breath but couldn't quite make out the words. Perhaps it was better not to. Then she stopped. "And what is the event?" she asked softly. I clicked my pen and bent down to pick up my clipboard. My recent mission had not been kind to my ribs. "The event," I explained, "is a supernatural phenomenon, often described by contact with a living entity. In other words, it means you've stumbled upon an urban legend." She swallowed hard. At this distance, I was just starting to make out her features, but I already knew curiosity was winning out. I gestured with my pen toward my clipboard and cleared my throat. "You said your name is Amanda Haynes, correct?" "Yes," I scribbled on the form, "and the event occurred 2 nights ago in the suburbs of the Casket Mountains." Her sneakers squeaked on the concrete floor as she turned back to her chair. Her expression had changed. The anxious panic was gone, the darting eyes too. Now she was looking directly at me. She was weighing whether to stay or go. "Yes," she said after a moment. "In the woods, we were camping." I checked off 3 more boxes on the clipboard. "Excellent. So far, the location matches previous sightings of the entity." I sighed, placing the clipboard and pen on my lap. "Why don't we start from the beginning?" Before she began, she narrowed her eyes. "How do I know I can trust you?" "This situation is unusual," I suggested. "No, it's dramatic, like I'm walking into a X-Files episode," she replied. "Fair point, you see my badge," I continued. "Badges can be faked," she retorted. I raised a hand to my face, tracing the deep scars. "What about these? Nobody gets these on a TV show." She was silent, still suspicious. Her gaze drifted down to the clipboard on my lap. She was analyzing it, trying to determine if it was a real government form. I was all too familiar with these attitudes. She wanted to believe, but wasn't quite ready. "Let me ask you this," I said, handing her the clipboard. She began to scan its contents. "When you told Search and Rescue that a monster attacked you, did they believe you?" Our eyes met. In them, I saw surrender. She understood, just as I did, that I was her only hope. What she didn't know was that she was my only hope, too. I had been hunting this legend for nearly 40 years. It was, arguably, my life's work. "I understand what you mean," she admitted. "All right, let's get this over with." She returned the clipboard to me, and I clicked my pen, moving its tip to the encounter description box. "All right," she said. "Who did you go camping with?" "Just Rachel," she said, her eyes flashing with something guilty, perhaps. "We've been friends since elementary school, been hiking together many times." "Okay," I said, writing the name on the clipboard. "Rachel Toy, correct? The victim." Amanda nodded. "We went to get away from the boredom of city life. Rachel had just ended a pretty serious relationship, and I didn't want her to just hole up in her apartment with all those memories. Her voice cracked, emotions spilling out. I suggested we go hiking that weekend in the Cascades. There's an old trail we discovered last time we were there, just slightly off the main path. I told myself we could try following it to see where it led. She wiped away burgeoning tears with her sleeve. Rachel didn't want to, she said. She was too depressed to even buy food, let alone go hiking. Eventually, I convinced her. I understand, I said quietly. Long journey. I don't know. It was a very old trail, almost completely overgrown with trees, no mileage markers, she replied. Estimate, I tapped the clipboard. About 8 miles, maybe. We left early that morning and it took us 7 hours to get there, she mused. I whistled, scratching my belly. Quite a hike. Actually, it wasn't too bad. We'd both done longer, harder routes. This time, though, we didn't end up going as far as planned. She's confused. Why is that? I thought. We came across an old cabin. It was dilapidated, windows broken, looked like no one had lived in it for decades. Amanda's eyes seemed to recall the memory of that terrifying moment. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest. I had to stifle the excitement before it burst out. I had scoured that cabin hundreds of times, and that thing had never appeared. A cabin? I asked excitedly. She nodded, her gaze leaving me to fix on some indeterminate point on the ground, lost in thought. She was remembering everything. We guessed it might have been a ranger's cabin, which would explain the abandoned trail leading to it. She paused, her mouth agape, words seemingly caught in her throat. Rachel suggested that instead of pitching our tent, we could sleep inside. I reminded her that the windows were all broken, and it was November. Besides, it was probably full of cobwebs. She said all the better. Let's pitch the tent inside the cabin, double safety. Amanda bit her lower lip, her voice growing softer as the story continued. The sky was full of dark clouds. The weather forecast had predicted rain, but now it looked even worse, more intense, like a storm was brewing. So I agreed, and we both went inside to check out the situation. What was it like inside? I asked softly. It was like a nest. We spent little time moving around inside. It wasn't large, just a few rooms, but branches and dry leaves covered the floor. Every step we took was accompanied by the sound of snapping twigs. The entrance led into a small kitchen alcove with a wood-burning stove and a dining table. Inside was a living room with a few rotting chairs, and finally, a bedroom full of debris from a broken bed frame. This place was a mess, she recalled absently. This layout sounded so familiar. I could almost smell the cedar and feel the warmth radiating from the wood stove on cold December nights. I checked the bedroom first, she said. I found a few broken picture frames. Call it childish curiosity or stupidity, but I was drawn to them. One was old, yellowed, and faded, looked like it was from the 1930s. It was a picture of a young couple, well-dressed, probably their wedding photo. She pursed her lips, then looked up at me. Do you have anything to drink? I nodded. Of course, wait a minute. I reached down and unlocked my briefcase. Inside was a stack of documents and 3 bottles of water. 2 contained plain water, the other a black, murky liquid. I took out 2 bottles of plain water, twisted open the caps, and handed one to her. We both took a sip. Thanks, she said, wiping her mouth. My throat's dry from talking. She capped her bottle and continued. The other picture frame was newer. I mean, still old, but not ancient. She chuckled, but it was a nervous, awkward laugh. It was a picture of an older man and a scruffy-haired boy. They were standing outside the cabin, each holding a rifle. My eyes widened in surprise. Interesting. Amanda nodded in agreement. Yeah, I thought maybe it was the park ranger who used to live there when the cabin was in use. But before I could check any further, I heard a cracking sound, like wood splitting, and then a crash. I dropped the picture frame, and Rachel started screaming from the next room. How was she screaming? I leaned forward, my pencil scratching on the notepad. It seemed too early for Call Man to appear. Several crucial elements hadn't been met. But if the research of my predecessors had taught me anything, it was that legends could evolve. I had to keep all possibilities open. Amanda nodded. Yes, she screamed like she was about to be murdered. I rushed in, bear spray in hand, thinking I'd see a wolf, a mountain lion, or a bear, but I didn't see anything. I couldn't even find Rachel. I called her name and she answered, but with a groan. The sound came from the pantry, right next to the kitchen alcove. I looked over there but didn't see her. I ran over, wondering what the hell was going on, and then I saw the floorboards in the pantry. They were shattered, splintered wood fragments scattered everywhere. There was a gaping black hole in the ground, wide enough for a man to crawl through. My heart nearly stopped when her arm reached out from the darkness. Amanda closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She screamed, telling me to pull her out of there. I told her to wait. I took off my jacket and covered the broken wood, spreading it out because I didn't want her to get impaled. Then I reached down and pulled her up. She was crying hysterically, gasping for breath, and once she was out of the hole, she pointed at her leg. I asked if she was hurt, and she said she thought she'd sprained her ankle. The details of Amanda's event began to click into place in my mind. A sprained ankle, a terrified friend doll, familiar elements, and an unappetizing recipe. She kept going. Rachel said we had to find help immediately, and I was a bit surprised by her panic. I mean, it was just a sprain, not a death sentence, right? Anyway, I pulled out my phone and checked for service. Of course, there wasn't any. I asked to borrow Rachel's phone, and she could barely speak. She just kept pointing, but this time not at her leg, but at the hole in the floor. She kept whispering about something that was dead over and over again. Dead, dead, dead. I wondered if I was witnessing my best friend lose her mind, but I still wanted to be sure, so I went to check the hole. It was so dark inside I couldn't see the bottom, so I turned on my phone's flashlight. Her fingers fidgeted with a lock of hair, tugging at it as she continued her story. It took my eyes a moment to adjust, but once they did, I felt my blood run cold. Bones were scattered all over the ground. Deer bones, rabbit bones. Then, in the corner of my vision, I saw a human's skull. I swore a blue streak and my imagination went into overdrive. Rachel was screaming and I was adding fuel to the fire. We both kept repeating, "What the hell is this?" like a private mantra. Amanda took a breath, holding it for a few seconds. Goosebumps rose on her arms, just retelling the story was starting to agitate her. She exhaled. Then I remembered I wasn't in a horror movie. I remembered what I thought Rachel had been screaming about in the first place. I told her to calm down, that it was probably just a mountain lion or a grizzly bear's kill stash. In the basement, I asked. "Sorry," she said hurriedly. "Maybe I should have mentioned this sooner, but the cabin was raised off the ground on wooden stilts. In this area, it helps prevent things from getting trapped. There was a crawl space underneath. I guess an animal had been using that crawl space as a den." I checked a box on the form. The story still matched, at least to this point. The cabin was exactly as I remembered it. The question to ask was whether she had truly encountered Call Man or just a rabid wolf. The human skull was a notable detail, but not every predator occasionally gnawed on the bones of hikers. "A logical deduction," I said. "Did it help calm your friend?" "Yes," Amanda confirmed with a nod. Rachel started breathing slower. She gradually calmed down. Finally, she was ready to try standing up, and she could, but just barely. She limped to a dusty wooden chair near the fireplace and sat down, wincing. Rachel told me she didn't think she could make it down the mountain. I heard a clap of thunder in the distance. I went to the window and saw the blood-red sun setting towards the horizon. Storm clouds were rolling in, and rain began to patter on the cabin roof. Rachel groaned in pain, and she showed me her phone. Absolutely no signal. "Eventually, a search and rescue team found you both, right?" I asked softly. "That's right," she nodded. "How, if you had no way to contact them, and you hadn't been gone longer than expected?" I continued my line of questioning. Amanda sighed, a hint of annoyance in her tone. Clearly, she didn't like being interrupted once she started talking. "Actually, I was just about to get to that." I leaned back in my chair. "It's all the better for me." As I said, Rachel and I go on these trips quite often. I go more than she does, but generally a lot. I'm always prepared. Waterproof clothing, bear spray, flint, and fire starter. I have it all. I don't like doing things halfway, so I made sure to bring a GPS beacon. It sends a one-way distress signal. "Ah, okay," I said, making a note. "A survivalist then." The fire in her eyes died down. She paused, a long silence stretching between us. When she spoke again, her voice was hoarse. Not as much of a survivalist as I should have been. Rachel wanted me to use it, but I told her no. Strange, let me explain. Amanda's gaze met mine, her face etched with a plea, a desperate desire to be understood. Rachel wasn't in immediate danger then. No one was, plus, a storm was coming and it looked like a big one. She took a shaky breath. I was all too familiar with that look. Water was tearing at her mind. My dad was a rescue worker. He died trying to rescue two teenagers trapped in a cave. A tragic backstory. I had wondered when it would come out. Somehow, all human folly in this world can be traced back to emotions overwhelming our survival instincts. I noted her reason on the clipboard. I didn't want anyone to risk their lives just because we had food, shelter, and weren't in danger. I told her no, I couldn't be responsible if something happened. She sighed before continuing, and Rachel understood. Amanda fell silent. She stared at me, and I recognized that familiar look I'd seen 1,000 times. I wanted to roll my eyes. I wanted to spit in her face for her naive idealism, but I restrained myself. Instead, I offered a sympathetic smile and a slight nod. You made the right choice. It was the only choice you could make, knowing what you knew in that moment. Then she brightened again. Yeah, I guess so. So you decided to stay in the cabin? You weren't worried that the bear or mountain lion using the cabin as a snack bar would drop by? I continued my interrogation. She sighed wearily. At that point, we didn't really have any other option. I'm an outdoors person. I'd seen many storms, and I knew the one coming was going to be big. The cabin was the best option, but we still took precautions. I kept the bear spray close, and we closed all the doors. A mountain lion can't open a door, and a bear could break it down, but only if it felt it needed to. It would likely go into the crawl space under the cabin, further away from us. Certainly, logical, I agreed with a nod. However, I decided to put an extra layer of protection between us and the front door, just in case. I cleared out the broken bed frame and swept all the debris from the bedroom floor. Then I started pitching the tent. Her voice faded, memory once again summoning painful recollections. What happened? I asked, my arm hairs rising. What did you see? She nodded. Yes, animals were running in the clearing outside the window. They ran past the cabin deer. Rabbits, then a flock of birds darted past the treetops and started flying overhead. I licked my lips. Yes, very promising. My pen scratched on the clipboard in excitement. Call Man had a remarkable, unique characteristic in the world of legends. He always came from the same direction. Always. Which way did the animals run? Her voice was soft, fragile. I could barely hear it over the pounding of my own heart. South, she said. I wrote the word down and underlined it 3 times. My fingers trembled with excitement. My mind raced. After so many dead ends and missing persons, it was finally leading somewhere. I had found someone a survivor and not just that, but someone who could still retain their memory. How many animals ran? I asked. I knew the answer, but I needed to hear her confirm it. It took her a moment to speak. This was not easy for her at all. It was horrifying, all of them, she whispered. It was like a migration of life. My heart pounded, my breath hitched. Every detail of her story carried the same meaning. Call Man was coming. I took a breath and stood up from the chair, stretching my legs. My back felt like it had been crushed between 2 rocks, and sitting for so long always made it feel like a pincushion. Regardless, I couldn't be happier. Everything all right? She asked. Excellent. I picked up the clipboard and cleared my throat. What happened next, after the animals fled the edge of the forest? She opened her mouth to speak, but then stopped, her eyes flicking down to my open briefcase, staring at the files and the tarnished old bottle filled with black liquid. Why are you carrying that? She asked, her nose wrinkling. Its label is yellowed, looks like it's 20 years old. What's that stuff in the bottle? I frowned, kicking the briefcase shut. An experiment, nothing to concern yourself with right now. If you don't mind, please continue. I want to hear what happened after the migration. A look of disdain passed between us. She felt I was hiding something, and I felt she was prying into matters that didn't concern her. Fortunately, it didn't last, and she continued her story. Rachel called my name from the living room. Then she limped into the bedroom, leaning against the doorframe. She looked truly panicked. She asked if I saw all the animals running wildly, and I said yes. Her eyes were wide, and I could tell she was falling into another panic attack, so I told her that maybe they were just running from the approaching storm, the faster the better. Did you believe that? I challenged. I don't know, maybe. It seemed like the only logical reason, but at the same time, the whole scene was too strange, too wrong. She opened her water bottle and took a sip. Either way, I wasn't going to humor Rachel's paranoia. One of us had to be calm, right? I shrugged, I suppose. The sun was setting when those animals stampeded. Was it completely dark yet? She nodded. Basically, yes. I mean, the last rays of sunlight were just barely flickering through the trees. The storm made things worse. Dark clouds obscured most of the light. I quickly finished pitching the tent, and we set up the LED lamp Rachel brought. It felt very strange. Strange how? I pressed. Silence. She paused, shook her head, then mumbled something. Sorry, that's the wrong word. The place wasn't silent at all. The wind howled and the rain was coming down quite heavily, but there was no sound of life. No cawing crows, no chattering squirrels. I didn't even see any bugs in the cabin, despite all the cobwebs. Still, I pushed it aside, constantly telling myself that one of us needed to be calm. So we closed the bedroom door and crawled into the tent. Neither of us had an appetite, so we just ate a few energy bars for dinner and took out our books. We didn't talk. I don't even know if we were actually reading anything. I know I wasn't. I stared at the words, but my mind was a million miles away, too busy with the feeling that something was wrong with this place, wrong with this situation. She sighed, running a hand through her blonde hair. I suppose things always look scarier in the dark, you know. I nodded. Darkness always has a powerful effect, controlling human emotions. It makes it harder for us to see our enemies, and in my line of work, it makes it easier for them to see us. Unfortunately, it's often very necessary. You didn't talk at all? I asked, settling back into my chair. Not at first. After 10, maybe 20 minutes, Rachel broke the silence. She asked if we should use my rescue beacon because the situation outside was getting very bad. I knew, though, that wasn't why she wanted to use it, not the real reason. I reminded her that we could wait out the storm here and call for help in the morning, after it cleared. Amanda grimaced as if holding back a wave of emotion. I manipulated her, reminded her that my dad was killed in a failed search and rescue operation just because a couple of teenagers couldn't apply a little common sense. I observed her. Perhaps she was more cunning than I thought, yet still very naive. Still naive, even now. Rachel was silent. She agreed that we could call for rescue in the morning. I could tell she was very scared, and honestly, so was I. I knew we were both having the same thought, so I blurted out that there was no such thing as monsters. I told her we were goddamn adults, and we would deal with this. Amanda chuckled. It was small, full of doubt and regret. I promised her we'd laugh about this in the morning. This girl was a good storyteller. I suddenly wondered if her vlog was popular. Unlike the gum in my mouth, her words had flavor. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out a pack of gum, unwrapping a piece. It wasn't a cigarette, but it was close enough. Famous last words, I said with a wry smile. What did Rachel think of your speech? Amanda stammered. She was okay with it. At first, I thought she was even convinced. She didn't want to spend the night in fear any more than I did, so anything that lessened that fear a little was welcome. Amanda swallowed, her face blank. It seemed like everything would be all right, as if this was just another overnight hike. At least until we heard footsteps outside. A creaking sound, like old wood bending under something very heavy. It was hard to hear over the howling wind, but given our mental state, it was almost impossible to miss. Something was out there. Slow, steady footsteps. Something out there was casually strolling, and we both froze in fear. Rachel grabbed the lamp and turned it off, and then suddenly I realized how truly dark it was. Pitch black. I could only vaguely see Rachel, and she was sitting so close we were touching. Now it was just us, the storm, and the footsteps. I whispered to her that it was probably a deer or a mountain lion, or simply some animal seeking shelter. Amanda's eyes were glazed, her hands fiddling with the fabric of her jeans. She was immersed in the memory. Even I didn't believe my own words. Something inside me was revolting, screaming that we were in danger. We hadn't been safe since the moment we stepped into that cabin, and we wouldn't be safe until we were far away from this place. But I took a breath, repeating that stupid mantra in my head that one of us had to be the adult, one of us had to be rational. So we waited. I whispered that all the doors were closed, no animal could get in, we were safe. We were safe. I kept repeating it, as if saying it enough would make me believe it too. I tried my best to reassure her, to prevent another panic attack. Amanda opened her water bottle and took a quick gulp. Her hand clenched it, squeezing it tightly, and the plastic rustled. Maybe it worked. I couldn't see her, but I didn't hear anything either. She wasn't screaming. Good. She swallowed hard. Then I realized things were getting worse. Much worse. Why? We heard a piercing, screeching sound, like rusty hinges, and we recognized it. It was the cabin's front door. Something had opened it. The next second, the piercing screech was followed by thudding sounds, like heavy footsteps. The floorboards creaked, and we heard it that thing was moving through the kitchen and into the main area. As Amanda recounted, I reminded myself to keep writing, but it was difficult. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I could determine if she had truly encountered the monster I had spent my life hunting. Meanwhile, she continued. I was clutching the bear spray to my chest, and Rachel was groaning beside me. I hissed at her to be quiet because I knew if whatever was out there heard us, it would. It would come in here. She obeyed. Neither of us moved. We just listened. Thunder boomed outside, and the storm wind howled through the broken window, but somehow those footsteps were clear as day. I couldn't ignore them, no matter how hard I tried. Amanda's fingers found the armrest of the chair and gripped it tightly. They scraped against the worn wood. Keep going, I said. I pulled the safety off the bear spray, ready to spray whatever it was if necessary. Rachel grabbed my arm, and I felt her hand trembling. Her entire body was shaking. There was a pungent smell, and I realized it was coming from her. She was losing control. The footsteps came closer. By then, they were halfway across the room and approaching the bedroom door. The thing out there was close enough for us to hear this giggling sound, like very fast, short breaths. A kind of heh. It didn't sound human, and it was unlike any animal sound I'd ever heard described. It sounded like a nightmare. I circled a box on the clipboard, marking this sound as correct according to recent witness accounts. Call man would giggle before approaching its prey-in evolution in his legend. In my memory, I only recalled screams. Amanda continued the story. Rachel squeezed my arm so hard it hurt. Her fingernails dug into my skin, and I could feel her warm urine at the bottom of the tent. It was seeping through my jeans, but I didn't care. I didn't resist at all. I couldn't, because the moment I made a sound or moved, those footsteps would speed up, and something would open the bedroom door, and then I didn't know what would happen next. She stopped talking, tears welling in the corners of her eyes, and she wiped them away with her sleeve. Rachel couldn't take it anymore. She reached across me, hissing at me to give her the distress beacon. She pleaded with me to activate it, and I was trying to cover her mouth, trying to make her be quiet, but she was too desperate and struggled against me. The footsteps sped up. They were heading towards us, heavy thuds on the creaking wooden floor. I whispered to Rachel, if I send the distress signal, will the device beep? Tears streamed down Amanda's cheeks, her gaze fixed on the lifeless concrete floor. Something was swimming in those eyes, and I assumed it was self-loathing, but I wasn't entirely sure. I just knew it was familiar. What next? I asked. Rachel grabbed it. She furiously pressed the buttons, and it worked. It started beeping. The signal had been sent. Amanda's voice trembled, her lips trembling too as she uttered the next words. The bedroom door burst open, a long, piercing screech echoed, and we both froze. It was just the sound of rusty hinges, and the device was beeping. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I think we both did, but we were too scared. We were paralyzed. She swallowed hard. I put my finger on the trigger of the bear spray. I didn't want to use it inside. It would probably blind us both, no different than the thing standing outside the doorway. But I was ready to spray if I had to. Seconds passed, and all we heard was the beeping of the device and the rain and thunder outside. Then that giggling sound came again, rapid and hoarse. After that, the footsteps, and now that it was in the same room, it sounded enormous. The tent shook, the whole room shook. It was so dark we couldn't see any shadow pass across the canvas, but then, very soon, we didn't need to. The footsteps started circling the tent. Then a finger pressed against the side of the tent, tracing along it. Whatever it was, it started sniffing. Gently at first, then louder and more aggressive. I realized it wasn't human, but some kind of animal. It sounded wild and bloodthirsty. Amanda closed her eyes, hugging her head. She allowed herself a small groan before opening her eyes again. They were empty. Rachel couldn't take it anymore. She screamed at it to leave us alone, screamed that we had a gun. She turned on her flashlight and yelled at it to get out, go to hell, burn in hell, and so on. I assume that plan didn't work out so well, I said sympathetically. She rubbed her arm agitatedly. I don't know, I thought it would. It left. Excuse me, I asked, lowering my clipboard. It left, just like that? My hand clenched the pen so tightly my knuckles turned white. No way it just left. It didn't even get a good look at the thing. It left the room, Amanda said in a small voice. It went into the living area, but then it stopped. It didn't leave the cabin. Her voice trembled. It waited until there was no chance, and then the real nightmare began. I let out a sigh of relief. The story was more interesting than I thought, and I knew right away it couldn't end that quickly. It couldn't. This might not even be Callous Man. I cleared my throat. What happened after it entered the living area? Rachel whispered to me that we should run, Amanda said. I reminded her that her ankle wasn't good. She had barely limped into the bedroom, so how far would she run in the dark, rainy woods on slippery ground? She said if we stayed, we'd both die. Amanda shivered. I knew she was right, understood it perfectly, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. It felt like the tent was the only thing separating us from that thing, and as long as the canvas was between us, it couldn't see us, and we couldn't see it, as if it didn't exist. I had to work hard not to roll my eyes. Still, I flipped a page on the notepad and maintained a poker face. Her reasoning was that of a child. People often faced fear with illogical and sometimes meaningless survival methods. Of course, there was no magic hidden in her tent. Nothing in it could save their lives. Keep going, I said. It started with a creak on the floorboards. We heard its footsteps again, but it wasn't coming towards us. It was pacing back and forth out there in the living area, and its giggling grew louder and louder. Soon, the giggles became heavy, pressured. It started to growl. She took a breath, trying to suppress a sob. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and her eyes glistened with panic. Then everything went silent. No movement, no growling, no more of that cursed giggling. Only the thunder outside, the howling wind, and the rain falling on the roof. I sat there, clutching the bare spray. Rachel was crying. We both prayed it had left, prayed it had given up, decided to move somewhere else and I urged her. She looked at me, her eyes filled with desperate horror. Then the entire cabin shook. Heavy footsteps stomped on the floor, accompanied by a horrifying, wretched shriek, like hundreds of human screams mixed together and pouring from a single voice. Rachel and I went insane. We screamed, clawing over each other, trying to unzip the tent door to get out quickly, and then our world turned upside down. It was as if we were thrown into a washing machine. My head hit her knee, and then I tumbled around, bumping and thudding amidst chaotic sounds and fabric. I suddenly realized the tent was being lifted off the ground. Above, in the light of the LED lamp, I saw two gnarled, broken deer antlers piercing through the fabric. That monster was tossing our tent around like a mad deer. Soon after, the tent was ripped apart, and we fell freely, crashing to the ground in a chaotic, painful spectacle. Rachel crawled over me, holding the lamp, and in that frenzy, I saw her lunge towards the window. Meanwhile, the light from the lamp swept across that disgusting monster. Amanda suppressed a choked sob and sniffled. "I'm sorry," she said. "I need a minute." "Take your time." I reached into my jacket pocket for a pack of tissues. I handed it to her. "Here, wipe your tears and nose." She took it. After she finished, we both sat in silence for a moment. Her lower lip trembled. It must have been about 8 feet tall. It was hunched over, humanoid in shape, but its chest was covered in fur, and its legs were like a bird's. It had a mass of long, tangled black hair, and its antlers grew out of its eye sockets. I excitedly marked these details down on paper. "Yes, good, almost perfect description, just missing a few key points. The antlers," I emphasized. "Can you describe them more specifically?" "They were twisted," she said slowly. "They jutted out at odd, uneven angles, and around them was a circle of eyes, dozens of tiny, black pupils." She closed her eyes and swallowed hard. I almost didn't see them, except they all blinked at once, and I remember thinking at the time that it was the most terrifying thing I had ever witnessed. "All of them blinking?" I asked. "No, all of them staring at me," she replied. "Did it attack you?" I asked. Call Man's defining characteristic was his method of attack. If she described it accurately, I had her. I had the link and I would get him. She shook her head. No, I thought it would, but then Rachel made a commotion. She was hoisting herself onto the windowsill, then toppled over to the other side. The monster turned towards her, giggling, and lunged straight for the window. That thing was too big for the frame, but it didn't care. It was like a snake, the way its body twisted to squeeze itself into the window frame. It clung there, and I saw thick claws on its scaly feet and impossibly long fingers grasping the frame. It tapped those fingers on the wall before launching itself after Rachel. My pen flew across the paper, filling in details and circling boxes as the information came. Excellent! I've been waiting my whole life for this moment. Amanda continued. I sat there for a second, too shocked to move, and then I realized my friend was out there being chased by a damn monster. I stood up, turned on my phone's flashlight, and in the darkness, through the rain and swaying trees, I could see Rachel's light flickering in the distance. I called her name, screamed her name, but she either didn't hear or didn't care. I scanned the area for the monster, but I didn't see anything. I leaned out the window, looking around the cabin, using my phone light to illuminate as much as possible, but it wasn't there. The monster had vanished. I'm surprised you didn't take the opportunity to run away, I said. The monster was clearly more interested in Rachel. Amanda glared at me. There was a stubborn defiance in her eyes, and I had to remind myself that most humans have a strange obsession with self-sacrifice. Perhaps it was a result of Hollywood brainwashing them. Perhaps it was simply because they hadn't suffered enough, but they couldn't resist its allure. Even before she spoke, I already knew. I couldn't abandon her, Amanda snapped. I pulled her out here, forced her on that hike. I suggested we take that stupid, overgrown trail. I refused to use the beacon before it was too late. This was all my fault. If I abandoned her, I could never forgive myself for as long as I lived. Her voice broke. Even now, I can't. So you followed her? I glanced up, asking. Yes, I climbed out the window and ran, trying to follow her light as best I could. One hand held the bear spray, the other my phone. The light from the phone screen was weak, but enough to keep me from tripping or running into trees. I kept calling Rachel's name, telling her I was coming. With an injured ankle, she couldn't have gone far. On the other hand, adrenaline can do wonders, I said. Amanda shook her head. She wasn't going as fast as I was, at least not at my speed at the time. I was catching up, just enough to see her silhouette ahead and the light from the LED lamp bouncing up and down with her limping steps. Then the light went out. Rachel's shadow disappeared, and I heard her scream. I bent over, running with all my might, my lungs burning. My feet slipped on the mud, but I didn't care. At this point, I wasn't thinking anymore. All my actions were guided by instinct, and instinct told me that if I didn't get to Rachel quickly, that monster would kill her. Her words faltered. Amanda's body trembled, and then she collapsed. She couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears streamed down her face, contorted with choked sobs. Soon, her palms were drenched in tears, but this brave girl forced herself to continue, not giving up. Rachel's scream died down. I could barely see anything. The LED lamp lay discarded ahead, and in the dim light, I just barely made out a shape, but it was the sound that haunted me, and probably always will. What sound? A wet tearing sound, like skin being ripped apart, followed by a heavy splat of blood and then a sickening crunch. Then I heard a rustling, swallowing sound. I lunged forward, my body now running purely on adrenaline. I raised my phone high as I closed the distance and saw it, she let out a loud gasp. I saw the man with deer antlers protruding from his eye sockets. He was hunched over Rachel's corpse. One of her arms was torn in half, barely clinging by a shred of flesh. Her hand was gone. Blood was everywhere and still gushing from the wound. I was too shocked to move, too stunned by the sight of my friend being devoured alive right before my eyes. Her voice trembled, then burst into a sob. She brought a tissue to her nose and blew a large amount of mucus into it, then roughly threw it onto the warehouse floor. She wiped her face with her sleeve. Then that thing lifted its head, and it tore off Rachel's other arm, beginning to chew noisily. It was more disgusting than anything I had ever witnessed. I don't believe the human brain is programmed to deal with a sight like that, you understand? There was nothing in my mind that knew what to do with it. After chewing, it swallowed the armhole, then opened its mouth wide again. Its lower jaw hung all the way to the ground. The mouth was so wide a grown man could walk straight into it. It sat there before the corpse for a second, and then that chorus of screams began again, as if hundreds of painful cries were merged into one single voice. A bunch of human arms reached out from that mouth, flailing towards Rachel's limp body. They clung to whatever was left of her hair, her collar, anything within reach. Then they started pulling her into the monster's mouth. Amanda trembled uncontrollably as she recalled. Yes, exactly as in my memory. Amanda blew her nose into a tissue again. Then I heard Rachel moan, and the blood in my veins ran cold. I realized that all that time I had been standing there, watching that disgusting thing devour her, she was still alive. I had witnessed myself being eaten alive. My mind went blank. I aimed the bear spray directly at the monster and sprayed, screaming at it to get away from her. It startled, shrieking amidst that symphony of screams, and backed away into the bushes. I seized the opportunity, shoving the LED lamp into Rachel's hand, telling her she needed to hold onto it for both of us, and she nodded weakly. Her face was completely drained of color, and I knew she didn't have much time left. I pulled her intact arm over my shoulder, gripped the bear spray tightly, and started putting distance between us and the monster. She groaned constantly, calling my name, Mandy, just that one word repeated, but I told her to be quiet. She needed to save her strength, and I needed to hear that thing. She obeyed me. We hadn't gone far when I heard its earth-shattering footsteps pounding on the ground. It was rushing towards us. I spun around, and the light from Rachel's LED lamp just barely illuminated the monster for a moment before I sprayed some more bear spray. It giggled painfully and brought its long-fingered hands to cover its eyes. I didn't wait for it to recover. Keep going, I didn't know where. All I knew then was to run from this thing because it wouldn't stop until its job was done. Again, I heard the ground-shaking footsteps, spun around again, and sprayed directly at the monster. It roared in pain and recoiled, but only a few seconds later, it charged again. Amanda crumpled to the ground, sobbing loudly. She clutched her hair, pulling so hard I feared she would tear her scalp. She choked out, I realized I couldn't carry Rachel, couldn't run away from this thing because I felt the bear spray was almost empty, and each time I sprayed, it became less and less affected. She shook her head, her eyes red-rimmed, her cheeks streaked with tears. She sniffled and wiped her nose on her sleeve. I had to abandon Rachel. I had to, otherwise it would kill both of us. You understand? For the first time in her desperate recounting of the event, I understood. Yes, I said. Life isn't easy. There are no true heroes, only pretenders. You made a difficult choice, but a necessary one. Amanda stared at me for a long time, as if she was searching for something in my expression. Finally, she nodded slowly. Right, she said, wiping more snot on her sleeve. Her voice became steadier, the tears no longer flowing in torrents. I did what I had to do. I crouched down beside her, apologizing. I apologized over and over again. And then I heard the sound of that thing approaching, so I ran. I ran for my life deeper into the forest. Behind me, I heard that chorus of horrifying screams. She swallowed hard, her voice faltering. I heard the familiar sound of flesh being torn, then the sickening crunch of breaking bones. I heard the monster devouring Rachel. I tried not to listen, tried to focus only on running, or the sound of the rain, or the thunder, or the wind, but I couldn't. All I could hear was the sound of my best friend being eaten alive. Silence enveloped us. I cleared my throat. Is that all? You escaped and met the search and rescue team on the way. No, she replied, closing her eyes, a look of resigned regret on her face. I heard another sound, the sound of a helicopter. Soon after, I caught sight of its headlights sweeping through the forest. Knowing this was probably my only chance, I started waving my phone light frantically, creating as much chaos as possible, and it worked. The helicopter flew closer. They lowered a rope ladder with a rescuer. He tied me to the rope and asked if I was alone. At that point, I was in a state of psychosis, screaming a rapid torrent of words. I yelled that a monster had attacked my friend and pointed towards Rachel's LED lamp, now just a faint blur in the distance. I told him it had killed her. Amanda swallowed hard, wiping away tears. He radioed for backup, pulled me up, and said he would go look for Rachel. I told him not to. I knew if he did, he would die too. It would kill him just like it killed her. But because of the noise of the wind and rain, he probably didn't hear or didn't care. They pulled me into the helicopter, and a few minutes later, I heard the man's voice on the radio. It was panicked, breathless. He said he needed stretchers down there immediately, that he had found the other woman and she was still alive. Have you spoken to Rachel since then? I asked softly. Anda shook her head. No, she's in a deep coma. Both arms are gone. Her wounds are infected and she has severe pneumonia. The doctors aren't sure if she'll make it. She brought a hand to cover her mouth, trying to suppress a sob, her eyes wide, her body trembling uncontrollably. I left her there to die. If I had just stayed a few more minutes, the rescue helicopter would have found us in time. It could have scared away that damn monster and Rachel would still be very badly injured. I said for her, you can't blame yourself. You didn't know the helicopter was right there. All you knew then was that something wanted to kill you and it was taking your life. Her shoulders shook with weak sobs. I could have stayed with her, she cried again, and this time I let her cry for as long as she needed. In my many years doing this job, I rarely encountered such profound grief, and it felt as strange to me as the anomalies I had dedicated my life to finding. Self-loathing for something as simple as the instinct to survive was truly inhuman. I'm sorry, she finally said. That's all. Can I go now? I leaned back in my chair, frowning, not because I lacked empathy for her, but because these mixed reactions only delayed the process of resolving the real problem. In her case, it was revenge for Rachel. She straightened up, sniffled, then answered her own question. I'm leaving. Wait, I said. She stopped. What? The cabin, I mean. I leaned forward. Can you lead me to call Man? Call it a less than pleasant childhood experience, or that I was a lazy, weak guy, but I particularly disliked trudging through the woods for work. But it seemed my job had a morbid sense of humor, because I found myself stuck in tree-filled barricades with more excrement than I ever wanted. And to be honest, I never wanted to, except today. It took us a long time to get to the cabin, the girl said. She and her friend took 8 hours. Yes, and it took us 12. My prime was long past, unfortunately. But luckily, I didn't need to be in peak physical condition for the plan ahead. I still don't understand why you couldn't just navigate yourself with a map, Amanda said. I showed you the exact way there. Because, I said, my breath still ragged from the strenuous hike, this cabin doesn't exist on any map. You can show it to me as many times as you like on your iPhone, but unless you're right next to me, I'll never see it. It's simply how Man works. She narrowed her eyes at me. You keep mentioning that name. Why do you call him Call Man? I opened the cabin door, and immediately a smell of animal feces and death assaulted my nostrils. I call him Call Man, I said, stepping over the creaking floorboards, because that's his name. The name given by the first person to encounter him, and the name I use when referring to him. The first person, her eyes widened. Yes, I said, stepping into the bedroom. The floor was strewn with the remnants of Amanda's torn tent. A small device lay a few feet away, and I guessed it was the distress beacon she had mentioned. Wait a minute, she appeared in the doorway behind me. You're the first person to see the callous man. I nodded, bending down to pick up one of the broken picture frames she had mentioned, dusting it off. I held it up for her to see. This is a picture of me and my grandfather, showing off our rifles before a deer hunt. She looked completely stunned, her eyes fixed on the photo, then flicked to me. On second thought, you two really do look alike. I guess we do have some shared features. I threw the frame down. You've been here, she asked. Just visiting. My grandfather used to live here, I said softly. What the hell? Her voice faded. This is so weird. It feels like a nightmare. It can't be real. I spun the bottle of black liquid in my hand, catching it with a smile. You're talking to the right person here. If I had to guess, I want to wake up from this nightmare even more than you do. Not like you, she said, glaring at me. I wasn't trained as some kind of super spy or anything. Not like me, you're holding my gun. The only training you need is to aim and shoot, provided you don't shoot us. I pointed to the gun she patted at her hip. My revolver. That was the only condition for her to join this stroll in the woods, that she be the one to carry the gun. I had told her this. No problem, just remember, I said. Don't touch that thing unless Callie's man has already got his hands on you. I don't want to be shot to death by you before I'm done. And if he attacks you, she challenged. I can handle it, I replied indifferently. You can handle an 8-foot monster with your bare hands?" she asked, eyes wide in disbelief. The water bottle rustled in my hand. "Trust me, I'm an expert." I placed my hand on the windowsill and looked out at the clearing. Beyond the clumps of trees, the sun had turned blood red. Night was falling. "Are you worried?" I asked. "What do you think?" she said. "You'd better be as good as you say you are." The way she moved, the way she spoke, and the way she kept touching the revolver on her hip told me all I needed to know. She was scared. "Relax," I said. "Save the worrying for when our derantlered friend shows up." I chuckled at my own joke, but it didn't seem to register with her. She pulled one of the chairs from the living room into the bedroom with me. She sat down, back straight and stiff. I was almost proud of her. Sure, she only agreed to come along with that revolver strapped to her hip, but she chose to do this. She chose to avenge what that thing had done to her, what it had done to her friend. "He's coming," I mumbled, my eyes following the sun as it dipped below the distant tree line. Darkness stretched, swallowing the cabin in thin black streaks. "He's coming." Seconds passed, then minutes, and everything began to change. It started with a crow flying by, and I knew he was coming. I could feel it. A family of rabbits followed, darting across the clearing. Soon, the entire forest was stampeding past our eyes, fleeing from Call Man and the death he represented. I took a piece of mint gum, popped it into my mouth, and began to chew. It helped me focus. "Are you ready?" "What? He's coming?" She sprang up from her chair. "Is there a difference? Either you're ready or you're not." She frowned at me, but her body relaxed. "I'm ready. Are you sure you can kill it?" A mixture of impatience and anticipation twisted in my gut. I hesitated, wondering if I should lie. It would make her less anxious. Then I decided. It didn't matter anymore. We were both too deep now. "No, not sure." "No," she repeated, confused. She stood up from her chair, turning to question me. "You just said you were a professional. You said you've dealt with hundreds of different monsters." "I have," I replied. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She stared at me, hovering between stunned disbelief and furious hatred. She thought I had just signed both our death warrants. "I wasn't going to lie to you," I said. "I've encountered a lot of creatures, some bad, some worse. I know this job well, and I don't intend to die today, but Call Man is different." "Different how?" she pressed. I paused. We were standing on the brink, no turning back, but there were still words that could ruin everything. I needed to be more subtle. "He has power. He warps this world and manipulates space itself. That's why I need you. I need you as a lure. He chose you, that Call Man, handed you the key to his world, and he didn't say you couldn't bring guests." She shook her head. She was trying to piece things together. She was kind enough to still try her best, but there weren't enough clues for her to understand, and that was my intention. That was the plan. I needed her to obey, not rebel. It all depended on her cooperation. "I don't understand why he chose me," she asked suspiciously. The sun had completely set, the red-orange hues fading into darkness. I turned on my flashlight, shining it out into the clearing beyond the window, holding my breath, waiting. "Call Man is coming. He chose you because of your life," I explained, "because of the values you represent. They mean something to him." "The values I represent, like honesty and integrity," she sniffed disdainfully, as if it were a joke. "How can those things be valuable to a monster like that?" I smirked. "It means you're delicious." We fell silent. The night was quiet, eerily still, just as she had described. No sound of life, except this time the storm had ceased its howling. The sky was clear, not a breath of wind, and I could almost hear Amanda's heart pounding. "Ha ha," she sneered. "Now you're close enough for me to feel your breath on my neck. You're truly terrified. So what exactly do those values mean to him?" I corrected her. "Believe it or not, that monster is just a man. But when one acquires such terrifying power, the meaning of food and drink changes. It has less to do with nutrition and more with filling a void. He tries to use the concepts, the ideas he lacks, to fill that void." "What?" she jumped. "To be better, to heal himself," I replied softly. The clearing began to stir. My breath hitched as I saw it, the twisted antlers. They rose from the thorny bushes, revealing a face covered in tangled black fur, with a tiny snout and a shimmering circle of black eyes. Those black dots glowed in the flashlight beam. He wants to stop being a monster, she asked, her voice thick with astonishment. He's eating people to save himself. SHHH, I hissed, my eyes wide, and I grinned the most hideous smile in years. He's coming. I felt her stiffen behind me, but wisely she didn't draw the pistol from her hip. She remained calm. I gripped the water bottle, my hand reaching for the cap. No, I lowered my hand, reminding myself to restrain myself. It was still too early. Call man could still escape and vanish. I needed him closer. Beyond, he fully extended his body. Now I could clearly see his chest covered in black fur and his long, bony fingers clawing at the ground. His bird-like legs began to take slow, deliberate steps, claws digging deep into the earth. He's coming, I said, stepping back, right behind me, just behind me. She didn't speak, but I knew she was nodding. I heard her feet step on the floorboards, in rhythm with mine. My finger toyed with the bottle cap. Everything converged here. 40 years of horror and misery led me to this moment. A giggle tore through the air. He moved faster, each step a light jog. Time was short, but I still waited. He's coming, Amanda hissed behind me. She was panicked, her hands grabbing my shoulders, and I growled, pushing her away. Don't tense up, I commanded. Relax, almost done. My heart pounded wildly, seeing the monster again. After so many years, it brought back old memories. The little boy I once was surged, taking over my mind. My palms were sweating. He lunged, sprinting on all fours, his fleet of eyes locked onto mine. The broken antlers flailed wildly, along with his muscular body, kicking up dust behind him. His long fingers clawed at the ground with each stride. He giggled. He leapt into the window. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. I stared blankly at the creature I had once known so well, his terrifying, inhuman face staring back at me, and in it, I saw endless hunger, the need to feed. My body froze, blood ran cold, fear clung tightly as his fingers reached out, piercing through the window, and his voice trembled with delight. He wanted me. I lunged to the side. It lunged at Amanda, its antlers goring her stomach. Blood drenched the room. Her body slammed against the wall with a sickening crack, then lay there in the wreckage, whimpering. I kept as silent as possible. Caller's man shook his tangled black hair and looked around, orienting himself. First me, then her, then back to me. Damn it. My hand began to twist the cap of the water bottle. Too early. I needed him distracted, needed him to feed, needed him to commit, but perhaps there were no other options. It was advancing towards me. The floorboards groaned. My mouth was dry, my limbs twitching. Terror rooted itself in my chest. The little boy I once was surged, taking over my mind. Don't be strong. I opened the water bottle, my mouth stammering out, thur and no. Coleman crouched, its back arched. Its tiny snout began to open, wider and wider. The screams of 100,000 souls echoed from the void within it. Its hands reached towards me, desperately trying to pull another into their nightmare. GZA, I read on. I continued, but there was no time. They were too close. It was too close. I pressed myself as tightly into the corner as possible, but still felt the bone-chilling cold from their hands on my legs. They pulled so hard my balance shattered. I fell to my knees. Kuna? It couldn't happen like this. She held the values he needed. It was her, not me. I continued to chant, my lips moving ceaselessly, but now my body was purely driven by instinct, by long-honed behavior. I couldn't think anymore as I slid deeper and deeper into the abyss, into Coleman's jaws, my mouth still chanting, but my voice drowned out by the pleas of the dead screaming, groaning, begging. The incantation was all I had left. It still wasn't enough. It took too long. A deafening blast ripped through the demonic chorus. Coleman roared, its jaw sliding on the floor, its entire body writhing in pain. It stumbled to one side, then 2 more gunshots rang out in the night. It buckled at the knees. It was then I saw the scene behind it. I saw Amanda's bloody, slimy mess of flesh and bones. One of her legs was bent backward, her white shirt torn at the stomach, intestines spilling from the hole. Blood streamed from her mouth like a fountain, her 2 trembling hands still clutching the gun. Thank you, I breathed with difficulty, standing on my shaky legs. Thank you, Amanda. Another deafening blast. This time my ears rang as if a church bell had struck. I tumbled to one side. In the dim light of the lamp, I saw a bullet hole in the wall. Before I could turn to look at Amanda, a searing pain tore through my thigh, knocking me to the bedroom floor. Damn it. My hand instinctively clamped over the wound. Without looking, I could feel the warm, wet blood seeping through my fingers. Her face appeared before me, and she pointed the gun at me. I was too close. Very, very close. 40 years of misery, and now ruined by a blogger. "Do it," I roared. "Dying from a bullet isn't so bad after all. Hurry up before he gets us both." She lowered the gun, tears streaming down her face. She choked, but only blood flowed. "It's okay. I know what you want to say. I had to do it because it was the only way." I gritted my teeth, explaining. "One of us had to die, but if it was me, both would go." Her body jolted in shock. Her mouth still moved, but now there was only blood, no more words, just blood. Her face was ashen, her eyes blank, but I only had a fleeting moment to see it before Callow's man began to rise. "Ha ha ha," it's giggling, but this time it was violent, angry. His eyes locked onto me, the twisted antlers distorted in the lamp's light, making him even more monstrous, more inhuman. "Ha ha," he turned his back to me, he turned towards Amanda. "Fellas," I whispered, "Morath ungran." His heavy footsteps thudded on the rotting wooden floor. I didn't see Amanda, but I heard the gurgling of blood, heard her desperate body pressing itself against the wall, heard a gunshot ring out, then another. The footsteps advanced. So did my chant. The water bottle now trembled in my hand, the dirty liquid swirling like a vortex. "Gr Julia," another gunshot rang out. "Ray," the screaming chorus erupted. "Set Kona, Bilawa." Amanda emptied the clip 2 more times, then the gun only made useless clicking sounds. She was out of bullets. It was never enough. My lips still moved, even as I heard the sound of her flesh being torn, her limbs devoured inch by inch. She still had to hold on. She hadn't completed her mission yet. I read the last words. The water bottle flew from my hand, the filthy liquid exploding into a swirling black cloud like a smoke vortex. The screams stopped dead. Then I heard Call Man cackling wildly in confusion, heard Amanda's moan. She was truly a good warrior. The cloud only took a few seconds to coalesce into the most terrifying monster I had ever seen, but that moment seemed to stretch into eternity. His form twitched in flashes of lightning. His 12 eyes glowed an eerie blue. His 6 muscular arms were heavily chained to a collar, and his face roared in fury. "This time, I will have your soul, little man. I will savor him with a bitter cup of yours." A smile flickered across my lips. For the first time since Kallman appeared, I felt a hint of joy. "Too bad to disappoint you, Dryhard, but I called you here with an offering." The demon's brows furrowed. Its mouth opened, revealing jagged teeth. "I see no living beings here except one," he chuckled. He reached out to grab me, but as his fingers brushed my throat, they hissed and evaporated. He roared, recoiling his hand. "She is your offering," I said, pointing past Callie's man to Amanda's mangled corpse. "So obey me." Another chorus of screams interrupted. Kallman's jaw snapped open, and once again hundreds of arms reached from his throat. This time they were directed at the newcomer. They pierced through the hazy image, snatching the tall demon, Dreer. His voice lowered into a growl. "Very well, the word is spoken, soul for a soul." His body split, bypassed Caller's man, and reunited before Amanda. "You're almost dead," she looked bewildered. She didn't understand what was happening. "I gave the girl a merciful death. Dreer will treat her soul more kindly than Call Man." The demon's hand reached out, and in an instant, her body disintegrated, leaving only a bloodstain. Carlo's man turned back to look at me, his jaw sliding on the ground. He realized there was nothing left for him to enjoy in the demon, but what he wanted was inside me. He wanted the memory of his human form. He wanted revenge. He took a heavy step towards me, then another. The screams were piercing, but I didn't need my voice to be heard. The command was still the command. "In exchange for her soul, I want your soul." Pale hands reached out from the gaping jaws, clutching my legs, and I let them pull me. My body crumpled to the floor. He edged closer and closer into the beast's jaws, towards damnation. Then light flooded the room, and the entire cabin shook with the deep resonance of eternity. The screams faded into moans, then after a loud explosion, he vanished. Everything vanished. Call Man, the cabin. I lay alone in a dark field, the light from my lamp illuminating the clearing. A few tall trees surrounded me. My thigh throbbed, my mouth was parched, my conscience shattered, but I lived. I always lived. "Soon you will fulfill my covenant." A faint hiss echoed, cutting into my inner ear. He was everywhere and nowhere. I have taken 93 souls for you, only 7 more left. Yes, yes, I've heard it all before, I groaned. Now give me back my soul. A swirl of smoke, and the scowling demon materialized before me. He separated one finger from his 6 arms and created a glass vial filled with a cloudy purple liquid. He didn't deserve this, he said. He is your bloodline. Don't lecture me, I replied, reaching for the vial. We both know he never should have become what he was. The demon recoiled, staring intently at the vial. What should happen and what actually happens are completely different. You shroud yourself in illusions of intention. He enveloped me in a swirling tendril of smoke, his face appearing near my arm. You forced that fate upon him. He never wanted to be involved in your war. No one ever does. And war still comes anyway. A feeling washed over me, regret or remorse. Whatever it was disgusting. I blamed that woman. Why didn't she just shoot me? No, I told myself, pushing it aside. I had more important things to worry about. The vial, I roared. Hand it over. I'm afraid I miscalculated, he muttered, staring curiously at the vial. Soul for a soul, that was the covenant between you and I. I swallowed hard, my throat like sandpaper. When was the last time I had a drink? You have his soul, now give me back my soul, my voice cracked. God damn it, my voice cracked. The demon's eyes fixed on me, a faint smirk on his lips as he spoke, his voice deep and unsettling. I count over 100 souls in this vial. My heart pounded in my chest. Damn it, that's not fair, I screamed, trying to stand, but my thigh screamed in pain, sending me crashing down. I only asked for his soul. I didn't ask for all the souls he swallowed. But they are still a part of him. Please, it can't end here. Be reasonable, I pleaded. The demon roared, and his form grew enormous, lightning flashing around him, a tempest blowing as if to lift me off the ground. You chained me to earth for decades, made me a familiar grim reaper to serve you, then locked me in a water bottle, and you have the audacity to talk about being reasonable with me. I did what I had to do, I screamed. The war is coming and we need these souls, we need an army. Your petty war means nothing to me, Jard. He pointed a long finger at me, sparks crackling at its tip. Then, slowly, reluctantly, he clenched his finger into a fist. However, I am a reasonable entity. My breath caught in my chest, waiting for his every word. You have broken the terms of the covenant, but I have also fulfilled your wish. For that, I will offer a compromise, little human. A compromise, that's good, better than nothing. What is it? Dreer's eyes glowed. 1 month, 1 month. 1 month? I asked. Settle your affairs, prepare for war. 1 month from now, I will claim the soul I have dreamed of for decades. I will spend the next century scraping you from between my teeth. I sighed, leaning back on the grass. Better than I thought. After all, I'm surprised that cosmic bastard didn't just take me on the spot. Damn little words. All right, I said. Can we get out of here? He smirked, turning into an invisible swirl of smoke. Soul for a soul, no more, no less. He began to spiral like a tornado, the darkness raging wildly, and soon after he vanished, sucked back into the water bottle. Damn it, I guess I'll have to find my own way down the mountain. Trying to stand again, I winced in pain and fell back down. Damn it, her gun carved a pretty big hole in my thigh. No need to say it was her. The image of that woman haunted my thoughts. Her resolve, her strength, her blog. The girl named Amanda H. was a good storyteller. She was dead, but the story still needed to be told, and I didn't have much time to do it. In the corner of my eye, I saw a tangled, mess-torn, blood-stained canvas with tent poles sticking out. This was him. I limped over to it, and after a moment I found what I needed, a black device lying a few feet away, identical to the one in the cabin. The beacon. I reached out, grabbed it, and pressed the button. It emitted a beep. Good. It beeped again. You don't need me to tell you that the search party found me, nor that they asked me a mountain of questions. But the agency handled it smoothly. You also don't need to know that I'll be using crutches for the rest of my life. What you do need to know is why I'm posting this. You need to know why I'm telling you this story and why I want you to tell others. Friends, family, everyone. The truth is, war is coming. It's a war humanity isn't equipped to fight, but we're doing our best. To be precise, everything I've just said is classified information, but at the same time, it's crucial and must be spread far and wide. The thing attacking us cannot be stopped by missiles or guns. It cannot be defeated by humans. It must be brought down by other means, by mythical means. The higher-ups don't want to admit it. They don't want to sow chaos and panic, don't want to admit our hourglass is running out. But it's true, and sooner or later, chaos will come. We're doing everything we can at the agency, but it's not enough. Not nearly enough. They'll flay me if they know I'm posting this, but I'm running out of time. Screw them. We're begging you, all of you, if you see an inexplicable creature or something mysterious in the night, share your story. Let everyone know. Fighting these ghostly entities that are about to descend those monsters might be our only chance. And honestly, we need all the help we can get. Music,